In this video, we're going to talk about positive social relationships, including friendships, romantic relationships, and family relationships. And we'll begin with a brief discussion about marriage. So, are married people happier than single people? The answer from studies on people all around the world appears to be yes. On average, married people are happier than people who are never married, divorced, or widowed. In part, marriage is psychologically fulfilling because of the fundamental needs to belong. That is, people have an instinctive need to form close, affectionate relationship bonds with other people, and this often happens through romantic partnerships that are long term. In addition, people receive stability and social support through their most intimate relationships, including spousal relationships. And this comes with a substantial health benefit that we will talk about in a future video. Also, people derive a sense of intimacy fulfillment and self expansion, which is the extent to which our self concepts literally get bigger as we include other people in them. This is called inclusion of other in the self, and it happens mostly through shared positive experiences that we have with other people. In a sense, relationships are fun and we grow to be bigger and live a happier life than we would otherwise have if we didn't have those relationships. But there is a strong caveat to the general finding that married people are happier than non married people, which is single stigma. This is discussed in your textbook to some extent, and it's worth noting that if people who are not in marriages were also not subject to stigma and prejudice and discrimination, perhaps they would lead just as happy and just as fulfilling lives as those who are married. It's also worth noting how the institution of marriage has changed, especially in recent times compared to older times. And this is summarized in a wonderful book by Eli Finkel called The All or Nothing Marriage. In that book, Eli makes the case that the average marriage today is actually less fulfilling and satisfying and weaker than in previous eras of institutional marriage. But the best marriages today are stronger. In this sense, there is a dissociation effect where the rich get richer and the people with less are worse off today than they have been in the past. In part, this could be due to changing norms about how marriages are supposed to be fulfilling to people. In the institutional marriage era, which Dr. Finkel notes historically was around the 17 to 1800s in North America, the main requirements of a marriage were about procurement of food, shelter, and protection from violence. That is, more or less, survival. In the companionate marriage era, which was between the mid 1800s to 1960s, security and stability were more common for everyone in society, and so people's needs for marriage shifted to intimacy fulfillments. That is, people started marrying for things like love, passion, and a fulfilling sex life. Then, starting in the mid 1960s, we entered the most recent era, which is the self expressive marriage era. In this sense, marriage is not only about physical resources and not only about love and intimacy, but also about how romantic partners help each other to be individually better people. This is exemplified in the film As Good as It Gets, where Jack Nicholson's character says, "You make me want to be a better man." The idea is that in the self expressive marriage era, people are expressing themselves as individuals in a more positive way through their interpersonal relationships. Dr. Finkel argues that because norms and expectations about relationships have shifted so substantially across time, there's more and more pressure on marriage now to fulfill all of these different needs. And people aren't necessarily fulfilling all of those needs with one individual partner. That explains why the average marriage is weaker now than it has been hundreds of years ago. But for those who have the best marriages, who do all of these things together, are even more satisfied now than they otherwise would have been. Now, what about having children? Does parenthood make people happy? Well, the short answer is not so much. But let's examine this in a bit more detail. Think about people's motivations. Some people want to have kids and can't. Some people don't plan on kids, but then get pregnant by accident. Either of those situations is likely to influence well being in a negative direction. But I feel like those situations don't capture what we really want to know, which is, if you choose to have kids, will that make you happy? There are some ways that kids benefit us in terms of well being, but with parenting today, there tends not to be an overall benefit in terms of life satisfaction or positive emotion. Many people are surprised to learn that having kids is not associated with greater happiness. Although the association between parenthood and happiness is much higher in social environments where parents get lots of support, including paid time off from work, help from relatives, and don't feel time pressure to balance family with career goals. As your textbook authors write, if you are an individual who loves talking and playing with children, parenthood may be for you. However, if you are not drawn to children and prefer them at a distance, don't become a parent. More and more couples are choosing to go childless, especially in European and also North American nations. But now it's worth spending a little bit of time talking about what are the most important ingredients for romantic relationships, friendships, and family, and how are these dynamics similar to or different from each other. In other words, what makes relationships positive? When people feel like they can really open up to each other and communicate freely about what they're experiencing, especially on an emotional level, this is strongly associated with well being. So we would put this in the honesty, openness, and authenticity category. When people share parts of their lives with each other, this is also a great indicator of happy relationships and well being. This can include values and traditions, including religious or secular contexts, as well as activities like exercise or cooking or any number of other things. In romantic relationships, feelings of passionate love are present in the happiest couples. This is the kind of love that most people feel at the very beginning of their romantic partnership when they're falling in love, and it can feel almost like an addiction. In long term relationships, doing new and exciting things together with partners can help keep the spark alive. Variety is the spice of life in romantic partnerships. And remember that relationships take effort. Positive relationships don't happen magically. And also keep in mind that part of what makes people feel good in relationships is dependent on their expectations from society and culture. We have a shared schema for what makes a good friendship or romance or parent child relationship, and some of those societal norms are good, but not all of them are healthy. It's up to you to figure out which norms are valuable and which ones need to change.